2 hours ago, the White House crossed a line that Wall Street never imagined possible. President Trump signed an executive order designating Canadian pension funds as national security threats, freezing their assets in American financial institutions, and forcing immediate divestment from all United States infrastructure investments. Not tariffs. Not trade barriers. A direct financial attack on retirement savings using powers previously reserved for terrorist financing and hostile foreign governments. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called it a necessary measure to protect American strategic assets from foreign control. The executive order claims that Canadian pension funds, through their massive infrastructure holdings, pose risks to national security by owning critical transportation, energy, and telecommunications systems on American soil. But this was not about security. This was about leverage. Canada's pension funds are among the most sophisticated and successful institutional investors on the planet. The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board and the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec collectively manage over $890 billion in assets, with roughly $340 billion invested in United States infrastructure, real estate, and corporate holdings. They own stakes in airports, bridges, ports, toll roads, power grids, and water systems that Americans use every single day. Trump wanted to use that dependency as pressure, force Canada to accept American trade terms by threatening the financial security of millions of Canadian retirees. The calculation was simple. No government would risk destabilizing its own pension system. Canada would fold within days. Mark Carney responded in 75 minutes. What he announced sent shockwaves through global financial markets and left Wall Street staring at the worst coordinated asset withdrawal in modern history. The order's devastating scope. Let's be absolutely clear about what this executive order actually does. It does not just freeze Canadian pension fund assets temporarily. It forces immediate liquidation of hundreds of billions in long-term infrastructure investments, crashing asset values, and destabilizing markets that depend on stable institutional capital. The order has three core components. First, all Canadian pension funds are added to a watch list requiring enhanced scrutiny for any transaction involving American assets. That functionally freezes their ability to operate. Second, Canadian pension funds must divest from any infrastructure deemed strategically important within 180 days. That includes airports, seaports, energy systems, telecommunications networks, and transportation infrastructure. Third, any American entity facilitating Canadian pension fund transactions faces secondary sanctions and regulatory penalties. For institutions like CPPIB, this is catastrophic. They own a 25% stake in the company that operates 4 major American toll roads. They hold significant positions in California's energy grid. They are partial owners of logistics companies managing container traffic through East Coast ports. Forcing immediate sale of these assets means selling at distressed prices, taking losses that directly impact benefits for 20 million Canadian retirees. The White House expected panic. They expected Canadian pension fund managers to call Ottawa demanding immediate negotiations. They expected Carney to prioritize retiree security over national pride and quietly accept American terms to preserve pension fund stability. They were catastrophically wrong. Washington's fatal miscalculation. The Trump administration's strategy rested on a fundamental assumption. Pension funds are cautious, risk-averse institutions that prioritize stability above all else. Threatening their American holdings would force Canada's hand because no government can afford to jeopardize retirement security for millions of voters. But that assumption ignored something critical. Canadian pension funds do not just invest in the United States because of returns. They invest globally, and they have been quietly preparing for exactly this scenario for over a year. Washington expected emergency board meetings where pension fund executives begged Ottawa to find a compromise. They expected financial analysts warning about massive losses if assets had to be sold quickly. They expected Carney to face overwhelming domestic pressure to back down. None of that happened, because Carney was already 3 steps ahead. Carney's coordinated counteroffensive. Here is what Carney actually did. 75 minutes after the executive order went public, he walked into an emergency session of Parliament. Standing beside him were the CEOs of Canada's 3 largest pension funds, the British Chancellor of the Exchequer appearing via satellite from London, and the head of the European Investment Bank appearing from Luxembourg. The visual was unmistakable. This was not Canada acting alone. This was a coordinated financial coalition. Carney spoke for exactly 16 minutes. He opened with a statement that made every fund manager on earth lean forward. 48 hours ago, we saw this coming. We called London, Frankfurt, and Singapore. We told them if the United States weaponizes pension security today, they will do it to European and Asian investors tomorrow. They agreed, and they acted. Then he announced 4 countermeasures that sent markets into absolute chaos. First, all Canadian pension funds are immediately liquidating American infrastructure holdings and transferring capital to European and British markets. Not over 180 days. Immediately. $340 billion in coordinated withdrawal from American assets, the largest institutional capital flight in modern financial history. The European Investment Bank confirmed it would facilitate the transition. The British government confirmed expedited approval for Canadian pension fund investments in UK infrastructure. This was not a threat. The money was already moving. Second, Canada is filing emergency proceedings with international investment arbitration tribunals under 7 bilateral investment treaties. Carney revealed that legal teams had been preparing these cases for 14 months. Every argument drafted, every precedent cited, every damage calculation ready. The estimated liability exceeds $180 billion if tribunals rule that the United States violated treaty obligations protecting foreign investment. Third, Canadian pension funds are redirecting capital to infrastructure opportunities in allied nations with explicit security guarantees. The United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Australia all confirmed they would provide legal protections, ensuring Canadian investments could not be arbitrarily frozen or seized. The message was unmistakable. Democratic nations were actively distancing themselves from American financial reliability. Fourth, and this is the one that made Wall Street go silent, Canada is establishing an emergency pension security fund to guarantee benefits for all Canadian retirees regardless of investment losses from forced American divestment. $60 billion in federal backing, ensuring that no Canadian retiree would suffer because their government refused to submit to economic coercion. The bill passed Parliament with unanimous support 3 hours later. Carney closed with words that are now being quoted in every financial capital on earth. Retirement security is not a bargaining chip. Canadian retirees will not pay the price for American aggression. If the United States believes it can weaponize pension funds to extract political concessions, it has fundamentally misunderstood the nature of long-term capital. We invest where we are welcome, and we are no longer welcome in America. He walked away without taking questions. Markets opened in chaos. The market meltdown. The financial reaction was immediate and absolutely brutal. Not in Canada, in the United States. Within 90 minutes of Carney's announcement, the Dow Jones dropped 840 points. The S&P 500 fell 3.2%. Bond yields spiked as investors processed the implications of $340 billion in coordinated institutional withdrawal. But the real damage was not the immediate drop. It was the systemic risk that withdrawal created. Canadian pension funds were not just passive investors. They were anchor tenants in infrastructure financing. They provided patient, long-term capital that allowed airports, ports, and toll roads to secure additional funding at favorable rates. When they announced immediate liquidation, those infrastructure assets lost their financial foundation. Credit ratings agencies immediately flagged 23 different American infrastructure projects for review. Financing costs spiked. Several projects faced immediate refinancing crises because their capital structures assumed Canadian pension fund stability. The infrastructure impact was even worse. CPPIB owned a 25% stake in the company operating the Indiana Toll Road, the Chicago Skyway, and major toll routes in Virginia. Their forced exit meant those operators had to find replacement capital immediately or face operational funding gaps. Maintenance budgets froze. Toll increases became inevitable. At JFK Airport, where Canadian pension funds held significant stakes through a logistics consortium, The forced divestment triggered a refinancing crisis. The airport authority faced either accepting emergency high-interest loans or delaying terminal expansions that were already under construction. One infrastructure analyst told Bloomberg, Canadian pension funds were the gold standard for infrastructure investment. Patient capital, professional management, no political interference. Forcing them out does not hurt Canada. It destroys the financial model that built American infrastructure for the last 20 years. American pension funds were equally panicked. State and municipal retirement systems hold stakes in many of the same infrastructure assets as Canadian funds. When those assets get sold at distressed prices, valuations drop across the board. American retirees suddenly face portfolio losses because their government attacked foreign pension funds. The American pension community revolts. The response from American institutional investors was swift and devastating for the White House. Within 6 hours, the National Association of State Retirement Administrators released a statement calling the executive order a direct threat to the stability of retirement systems nationwide. CalPERS, the California Public Employees Retirement System, managing $450 billion, publicly condemned the move. Their statement noted that weaponizing long-term institutional capital undermines the foundation of global pension security and creates risks for all retirement systems, including American ones. The New York State Teachers' Retirement System warned that forced liquidation of Canadian holdings would crash infrastructure valuations, directly harming American teachers' retirement security. Pennsylvania's Public Employee Pension Fund, already underfunded, projected losses exceeding $2.3 billion from infrastructure devaluation. These were not Canadian voices. These were American teachers, firefighters, police officers, and government workers watching their retirement savings threatened because the White House attacked allied pension funds. Labor unions representing public employees in swing states issued scathing statements. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees called for immediate rescission. The International Association of Firefighters warned that pension instability could become a defining issue in the next election. The international financial response. The global financial community reacted with alarm, and something Washington did not expect. Coordination. The Bank of England issued a rare statement expressing concern about the weaponization of institutional investment access in disputes between allied democracies. The language was diplomatic, but the implication was clear. Britain was actively facilitating Canadian pension fund exit from American markets. The European Central Bank noted that stability in long-term capital markets requires predictability and respect for investor rights under international law. The European Investment Bank went further, announcing it would provide financing support for Canadian pension funds transitioning to European infrastructure investments. Singapore's Monetary Authority, overseeing one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, released a statement that stunned Washington. Recent developments raise questions about the security of long-term institutional capital in certain jurisdictions. Singapore will carefully assess these risks when making future investment decisions. That was not just commentary. That was a direct signal that one of the world's most sophisticated investors was reconsidering American market access. If Singapore pulled back, others would follow. Japan's Government Pension Investment Fund, the largest in the world, remained publicly silent. But sources told the Financial Times that internal risk assessments were being updated to account for political seizure risk in allied nation investments. That category previously applied only to authoritarian regimes. Now it included the United States. Trump's strategic catastrophe. So where does this leave Washington? 3 options, all disastrous. Option 1. Enforce the divestment order and watch American infrastructure financing collapse. $340 billion in patient capital exits immediately. Infrastructure valuations crash. American pension funds take losses. Refinancing costs spike. Projects freeze. And every institutional investor on Earth learns that American markets carry political seizure risk. Option 2. Quietly rescind the order and admit complete failure. That signals to every nation facing American pressure that coordinated financial responses work. It proves that threatening allied pension funds backfires spectacularly. And it hands Carney an unambiguous victory, demonstrating that preparation and coalition building can defeat American economic coercion. Option 3. Escalate with additional financial restrictions. That accelerates the very capital flight Washington fears most. It pushes European and Asian investors toward the same coordinated exit strategy Canada just demonstrated. And it permanently damages American credibility as a safe destination for long-term institutional capital. None of these options deliver what Trump wanted. He wanted leverage over Canada through pension fund vulnerability. Instead, he triggered a coordinated withdrawal that threatens American infrastructure, crashes markets, and undermines global confidence in American financial stability. The deeper strategic failure. What should genuinely terrify the White House is that Carney did not improvise this response. The coordination with London, Frankfurt, and Luxembourg was negotiated over months. The legal cases were prepared in advance. The Emergency Pension Security Fund was drafted and ready for parliamentary approval. The infrastructure investment pivot to Europe was planned and pre-negotiated. Canada saw this coming. They knew American policymakers were looking for pressure points. They identified pension funds as a likely target. And they built a comprehensive exit strategy that turned vulnerability into coordinated strength. One European finance ministry official told Reuters anonymously, "Canada approached us 6 months ago about contingency planning if the United States weaponized pension fund access. We agreed to facilitate transitions because we knew if they did it to Canada, they could do it to us. This was not reactive. This was strategic preparation." 2 hours ago, the White House thought it was leveraging Canadian pension funds to force political concessions. 2 hours later, it triggered the largest coordinated institutional capital withdrawal in history, crashed American infrastructure financing, spooked global investors, and united Democratic allies in building financial systems designed specifically to operate beyond American reach. Trump wanted to threaten Canadian retirees to extract trade concessions. Instead, he threatened American retirees, destroyed infrastructure financing, and proved that weaponizing pension security backfires catastrophically when targets are prepared and allies are coordinated. Mark Carney did not just counter the executive order. He turned it into proof that American financial dominance has limits, and those limits appear when Democratic allies decide they will no longer accept economic coercion as the price of partnership. Washington wanted leverage. It got a financial exodus, a market crisis, and a global lesson in why attacking allied pension funds was the worst strategic miscalculation of Trump's presidency.